Hey folks, Lenny Lawson, the car guru, here to talk to you about the difference between efficiency and effectiveness and how speed can be the enemy of both. What am I referring to? Well, I'm talking about anything to do with a big decision, any kind of big decision that you have to make. Sometimes we pull the trigger before we should. It's like, ready, shoot, aim. How did I come up with this thing to talk about? Well, I went to my house at lunchtime yesterday. They're building a barn for me. It's 30 by 40 metal structure. And the folks at JD Metals are who I purchased the building from. It's not like you go to one of these places that sell these little barn-like structures made out of wood, that they deliver to your house all done, get it nice and level, set it up on blocks. No, I had to pour a big concrete slab, 30 feet by 50 feet, and they started building these. Well, a lot of the components were built in the factory as far as the sidewalls. They come in these big sections, and then they screw it all together. But the guys that are doing it are very good at what they do. They're efficient and they're effective. But it doesn't mean that they approach all things in their lives that way, does it? Well, case in point, I was talking to one of the guys that's doing the installation, and he said, see that Dodge truck out there, or Ram truck? I bought that too quickly. I said, well, tell me about it. And basically, he had purchased the vehicle because it was at the very end of the year. As a matter of fact, December 27th, I think he said, purchased the vehicle without ever driving it. Found it online, and it wasn't too far away from where we live. Purchased the vehicle, sewed up the deal. The vehicle had a check engine light on. He said, can you turn the check engine light off? And they said, yeah, we can turn it off. What's the rest of that question? Will it stay off? Because if he had asked that, he would have found out. Well, no, it won't stay off because this vehicle has been heavily modified by somebody who really just was trying to make it faster, maybe make it a little bit more fuel efficient, more than likely, so that he could pull things that he probably shouldn't, like in some type of a tractor pulling competition or whatever. Sometimes these young guys will hook two trucks together and see which one can pull the other one down the road while burning rubber like crazy, pulling against each other. Yeah, that's what they do. Back in the old days when I grew up, well, let's call it the 70s, most guys wanted a Chevy Chevelle SS, maybe a Torino. Not me. I wasn't a Ford guy back then. But Chevy Malibu, Camaros, like a Z28. There might have been some Mopar vehicles like Dodge Challengers and Chargers and Super Bs and things like that guys were interested in. But they were cars. Nobody wanted a truck. That's what farmers use. And most of the trucks were regular cabs, long bed, and two-wheel drive in this market. Four-wheel drive really wasn't a thing. All the farmers wanted positive traction rear end, though, so if one wheel started spinning, the other would continue to turn. But that's about it. When it was real snowy or rainy or the field was wet, they would just put chains on. Why waste money on four-wheel drive? It just wasn't a big thing. Oh, but now these young kids, all they want is these diesel trucks jacked up. And really, the big trend now is to have the front end jacked up higher than the rear end. Have you seen those going down the road? That would be very tough for a short person to drive one of those because they'd have to really raise the seat up as high as they could just to see over the hood. I don't get it, but that doesn't matter. But that is the kind of person that had this truck before my friend that was putting up my building said he bought it. Well, come to find out, let's see, I think it had bought it from a used car dealer, signed all the paperwork, as is, no warranty. Less than 900 miles later, the transmission goes out. Calls the dealer. Will you help me? Nope. You bought it as is. Yeah, but I've had it 2 weeks and I've just put 900 miles on it. Nope. You're out of luck. What did it cost him to get it fixed? $12,000. Is speed the enemy of effectiveness? Yeah. In that particular case, pretty efficient purchase. Got it done in record time. But what should he have done instead of buying that truck when he did? He should have started 3 or 4 weeks before that and done his due diligence. Pull the warranty history from a Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram dealer. Pull a Carfax. Call the previous owner. Get it inspected by a mechanic. What has been changed on this vehicle? Call the previous, did I say call the previous owner? Yeah. Call them and say, what'd you do to this thing? They'll tell you. I wouldn't buy that car or truck. And so he wasn't effective in his purchase. Matter of fact, he's still using it today. So from that standpoint, he's trying to recoup his additional $12,000 investment in the transmission rebuild. Isn't that just crazy that rebuilding a transmission can cost $12,000? I rebuilt a transmission in it's out of a 1968 Ford Thunderbird that I put in my car hauler. It's called a C6 transmission, 3-speed automatic. Cost me $1,000 to get it rebuilt. And these new modern transmissions that have all kinds of gears like 9 speeds and 10 speeds, when they go south, you better get ready to slap a whole big charge on your credit card or go rob a bank because it's going to be expensive. And it's all the more reason when you buy a modern vehicle, buy some type of an extended warranty. I'm a big fan now. Didn't used to be, but I am now. Don't pay too much for it. Make sure you know what you're paying for it. Do the math. Make sure it makes sense. Consider your ownership cycle. When you buy a brand new vehicle and you buy a 5-year, 60,000-mile warranty, an extended service contract, does that really make a lot of sense? Because you're going to be covered under the factory warranty for 3 years or 36,000 miles. And sometimes on the powertrain, it'll be 5 years, 60. So what are you buying a warranty on? The air conditioning? The cooling system? The alternator? Sometimes it just doesn't make sense. But if you're buying a new vehicle, you plan on keeping it for a long time, you can buy a 7-year, 150,000-mile warranty that covers everything bumper to bumper, except the bumpers. Maybe that makes sense because you're going to be keeping it way beyond the factory warranty period. And all of these components are very expensive to replace or to repair. Sometimes I worry about whether the warrant or the technology to fix it is going to be around by the time it breaks in 7 years. New car dealers tend to keep their tools for anywhere from 10 to 12 years. Sometimes they get rid of them at that point. So it's kind of hard for them to fix vehicles that are much older. I don't do that at my dealership. I keep stuff. I've got stuff here that's 25 years old, just in case somebody rolls in here with a 25-year-old vehicle that has some type of computer issue and we need to solve it. Of course, I'm a little bit of a pack rat in that regard, but most people don't keep vehicles that long, and they don't have to worry about that. One of the other guys was talking to me there is about leasing, and he said, why would anybody lease a vehicle? And I said, well, because they buy a new vehicle every 2 or 3 years anyway. They don't put a lot of miles on it, and so that's why they do it. I say, yeah, but you don't own it. Well, you don't own it until you make the last payment to the bank that finances it either. He said, well, that's a good point. So you have to really consider a lot of different things when you're thinking about buying a vehicle, especially for business, but even for personal use, folks. You just got to take your time. You got to slow it down. You got to give yourself enough time You don't just wake up on a Saturday morning and say, let's go buy a new car. What? I'm not done with my pancakes yet. Yeah, it's not a good move. It's too fast. Speed. It kills effectiveness. Yeah, I mean, you get it done quickly, and then you regret it for the next 6 months to 6 years. That's what happens. I'll be back in just 1 minute. Okay, I am back. So Ford apparently did not learn their lesson, their $12 billion lesson on their EV experiment with the Ford Lightning truck and the Ford Mach-E. These were Ford's, I guess, attempt to compete with Tesla and jump into the EV game. I'm a Ford dealer. I was along for that ride. You know, it's funny how people will jump on things. We got one of the Lightnings in, which is the Ford F-150 that was all electric, and it was loaded. It was a platinum edition. We felt very blessed at the time. This was during the pandemic. So we put it online. It wasn't 2 hours later. We get a lead from a guy in California, and he said he wants it, and he will pay us. I hate to even say this. It makes me look bad. $30,000 over window sticker for it. And I said, what? You know, I knew that they were scarce. I knew that ours was extremely scarce. Well, rare, I should say, because it was a platinum edition. Most of the dealers had XLTs and vehicles that just didn't have that much of equipment. We had a ruby red platinum edition. And at the time, when I looked out on my lot, which normally has maybe 400 vehicles on it, I think I had about 25 new vehicles. I mean, the pandemic was going to put me out of business. I had nightmares. And then we come in one day, we get this platinum truck in, and this guy calls up from California and says, I'll pay you $30,000 over window sticker for it. And he's willing to wire us the money. And so is that a crime to sell a vehicle for that much over MSRP? I can hear some of you saying, yes, that's awful. Well, when you are just really questioning whether you're going to be able to survive the market, just imagine having something in your front yard, a really nice, well, maybe it's a 5-year-old lawnmower, John Deere. Somebody drives by and they just got to have it. Their dad had one. And they're willing to pay you double what you paid for it. You're going to sell it. And so don't be judging. So we sold it to him. He wired us the money. He even paid for the shipping. You know why he did that? Because he shopped at a bunch of other dealerships in Southern California and the southwestern United States, and he couldn't find one for less than $40,000 over sticker. That's how hot they were. Boy, times change, don't they? The last EV we sold, I think we lost about $15,000 on. So I lost half of what I made on that Lightning truck. That's the way the market goes. It goes up, it goes down. MSRP is a suggestion. That's why they call it the manufacturer's suggested price. Isn't that weird? Why do they call it suggested? Why don't they just call it manufacturer's price? Well, they say it's suggested because the law says they have to say that. They cannot dictate to a dealer what he can sell his inventory for. But so that's important for you to know what the MSRP is, because it lets you compare one dealer to another and make sure you're comparing apples to apples. You know, because if you're looking at a Mitsubishi Galant at one dealership and the MSRP was $25,000, you look at another one, the MSRP is $26,000, you know, there's got to be some type of equipment difference, because the dealer they really can't jack around with MSRP. Now, they can mark up the vehicle. You know, that Lightning was sitting out here in the matter of fact, when we sold it, it was still had plastic all over it and had been dropped off by the truck. And we hadn't even done the pre-delivery inspection on it. Still had plastic all over it and on the interior. And we pretty much knew that in this market, we could probably get MSRP for it until somebody reached across the fruited plain and made us that offer. Oh, we felt really good about it. But the market changed. And that's what happens. And that's really what happens to the early adopters. The people say, oh, I've got to have that. I've got to be the first one. It's not very effective. It's better to slow down. You know, if that guy that bought that Dodge or that Ram truck, if he'd have started that process, like I said, in late November, he probably could have found a better truck that hadn't been modified that would do the job. But no, he had to wait until 4 days before the end of the year. Why did he have to do it in that calendar year? Because of the business tax deduction that you get if you buy a piece of equipment or like a truck. It has to have a certain GVW in order, or gross vehicle weight rating, in order to be able to write it all off in 1 year. That's called accelerated depreciation. You know, typically a business will buy a vehicle and they'll depreciate it. The IRS lets you depreciate it over 5 years, but under their accelerated depreciation rules, in order to spur economic development, they will let businesses buy a piece of equipment. I think it has to be a certain value, or a vehicle as long as the GVW is over 6,000 pounds. Then, instead of having to depreciate it over 5 years, they can take all the depreciation in this year. And if they had a big year and their tax bracket is like 30%, then basically they deduct all of that. Government's paying for 30% of that new truck. That's pretty cool. So that's what he was doing. And then he gets to pay $12,000 for a new transmission in January because he was in a big hurry. He didn't do the things he needed to do. So what are those things again? If you're thinking about buying a vehicle, a used vehicle, go to the dealer or go to the dealer that sells that brand. Like if you're thinking about buying a Honda and you're at a Chevrolet dealer, get the VIN number, call the Honda dealer, and have them check that VIN and the warranty history on that particular VIN number. And they can tell you whether it was a problem vehicle or not and how often it was maintained. If it was maintained at their dealership or it came from someplace else. They can tell you a lot of different things. Then you pull a Carfax or an Experian auto check. Either one of those reports will do. Get the full report and see where the car originated. Was it sold new in Michigan and it's been up there for a long time and then it was transported down to Atlanta where you live? Do you really want a vehicle that lived in Michigan for 5 years with all the salt and rust and stuff? No. Was it a rental car? I don't really want to buy an ex-rental car unless it has extremely low miles. Was it a buyback? A vehicle that was a problem and was purchased or repurchased by the factory. I don't want that one either. That information will be discovered based on the warranty history, or it'll be on a Carfax or an auto check. And then you test drive the vehicle. You know, if you're buying a used car and it's in St. Louis, Missouri, and you live in Boston, kind of hard to test drive it. And if it's used, just don't buy it. Surely there's a vehicle very similar to that within driving distance of where you live. There's no reason to go cross-country to buy a common vehicle. If it's something really unusual, like right now I'm bidding on a 1932 Packard, and I've got all the history right there. There will be no Carfax history or anything like that, but I've got the history on Bring a Trailer, and I've checked the vehicle out. I'm probably not going to buy it. It's going to be too expensive for me, and I've bought too many lately, and I'll get in trouble. But man, it's pretty. And I don't have any, well, when I finish my new barn, I'd have some place to put it. Well, no. You've got to do your due diligence on anything. Speed is the enemy. And don't you forget it. I'll be back in just a minute. Well, I forgot to tell you about Ford. So what Ford's doing now is they're jumping back in. They didn't learn from the $12 billion write-off of all their EV stuff. And so they're building a new small truck, as if we didn't have enough trucks. This one's going to be electric. It's going to be about the size of a Ford Maverick. And it's going to use a different type of battery chemistry, which is cheaper. The electric motors were developed in-house, and so they will be less expensive. Its architecture, the way it's built, is completely different. It has a one-piece cast for the whole front of the vehicle, a different one for the center, and for the bed, it's a completely different casting. All aluminum, all bolted together or glued together, however they marry all of those different components. It's supposed to be cheaper to fix it when you wreck it. The insurance companies are excited about it because they won't have to total as many vehicles. They'll be able to fix them. I mean, when you take a pretty big hit in an EV, it's totaled because they have no idea what it's done to the battery and to all the other fragile electronic components in the vehicle. So Ford is jumping right back in. We're supposed to have it in about 2 years, maybe a year and a half. I'm so excited. But I seriously doubt that anybody will pay $30,000 over window sticker for that. But we'll see. Will I sell it to them? You're darn tootin', and you would too. Well, thanks for listening to this edition of My Car Guru. If you need me, text me, 423-552-2020, and I'll see you next time.